Good morning, everyone. Pedro Spinoza. We have the honor of having Humza Yousaf, the former Prime Minister of Scotland.
It's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be at Stanford. A pleasure to be talking to you.
Thank you so much for being here. We both love football and also tennis. And Scotland qualified after how many years?
28 years of misery, of pain, has finally been overcome, and we're coming to the US to win the World Cup. Well, maybe not win, but we'll give it our best shot.
Well, I'll see you this summer then. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, Humza, today at the Good Return podcast, we ask for next generation leaders, what tangible advice do you have them to find purpose in their careers? And perhaps can you share about your political background and how you were a member of the parliament in Scotland and what inspired you as a young leader?
I think the most important word in your question is purpose, because people can be attracted to leadership or politics for status, for office, for power. But actually, if you don't have purpose, then you're not going to serve the people that elect you. And so you've got to remember, what's your purpose? What drives you? What motivates you should be service. And leadership that is rooted in service is the best leadership that you can possibly have. So I would always say to people, look, it's a very noble thing to want to get into leadership, to get into politics. It can be transformational. Remember why it is you're doing what you're doing. Go in with the really good intention of serving the people that you want to serve. And by the way, if you do that, not only might you benefit because you might climb up the ranks of leadership, but you'll benefit a whole community, maybe a whole nation, maybe even more than that.
Yeah. And you mentioned the word purpose, Humza. For me, growing up in Peru, my mom would always say, you're going to be president, you're going to be president. And, you know, it's kind of crazy because in Peru, like a lot of the presidents are in prison right now, so it's a bad rep. But how do you define purpose? It's like a very deep question. How do you define the word purpose?
Look, I think for me, purpose has got to be rooted in service of others. And that's the way I was brought up. And look, I've never shied away from the fact that I'm from a Muslim background, a Muslim faith.
Yeah.
And I was taught from a very young age an Arabic phrase, Inna amala biniyat, which translates as, your actions are but by your intention.
Of course.
So if your intention is a really good intention, your actions will be really good as a result. So your Arabic is better than mine. So my father and mother taught me that from a really young age. The other thing they taught me, which is really important for leadership, is my dad said to me, look, however long you're in politics, and I've been in politics in one way, shape or form for 20 years, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to get things wrong. You're going to have ups and you're going to have some downs. The important thing is to realize, first of all, if you make mistakes, you own them. You hold your hands up.
Responsibility,
Ownership, accountability. But the second thing is that know that when you make those mistakes, they don't define you. Right? It's not the mistakes that define you, but it's actually how you... It's actually what you do next and how you make amends, but also make sure you don't lose focus of your purpose. So for me, purpose is rooted in service to others.
And the last question, Humza, and I love the answer, is you mentioned your Muslim faith. And here in the US, we have a lot of employee research groups of, for example, at Salesforce, you have Faith Force, at JP Morgan, at Google. I spoke at the World Economic Forum in Davos. I was telling you at the Salvation Army. To what degree is it important for the next generation of, Gen Zs or Gen Alphas to embrace a sort of religion or faith or spirituality? I think today we lack ethics. Don't you think? Everyone's addicted to phones, iPhones, Android. You see little kids and the iPads. Like, what are your 2 cents on faith? And if you could share more about your Muslim faith, I would love to learn more. You seem to be pretty open about it.
Yeah, look, I think actually that's the point. I think you should authentically be yourself. So if you are somebody of faith, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, whatever it is, Hindu, whatever your faith is, don't try to hide it. There was a time in politics where a very famous advisor in the Tony Blair government many decades ago said, Tony Blair doesn't do God, even though he was quite a deeply religious man. So we've kind of gone, I think, in a different direction where you should be open. And by the way, it doesn't have to be organised religion. You might have a deep spiritual sense of who you are, your connection to the earth, your where you're going as an individual. And what I would say is it's really important, and politicians are terrible at this, but what we should do is not just take care of your physical health.
Of course, your body,
Not just take care of your mental health. All these things are important. But take care of your spiritual health. And that spiritual might be religious, it might be non-religious. It might be, as I say, just a belief system, a spiritual sense of who you are. But I think really taking some time to meditate, to think about what you're doing and why you're doing it, is some of the best things you can do. And that reflection is some of the best training you can have as a leader.
Meditation, for me at least as a Christian, I read my Bible every day, I pray, I do worship with Enoch and other friends. It reminds me here at Stanford campus, the Muslim Association, the students partner with the Christians in lobbying and vouching that we don't have like an all-you-can-drink bar. And we were successful. Like, we partnered up. So my question is, how can, devout Muslims, Christians, how can we come together in a fragmented world? Because this world is polarized. How can we bring more unity in spiritual leaders?
I think it's really important to remind each other that we have far more in common than we have in difference. And so the commonality between Jewish, Muslim and Christian in particular, but actually look, all faiths, Sikhism is so strong on service. It has the 5 Ks, which is similar to the 5 pillars of Islam. So our faiths are rooted in common values. And so too often, I think this is true in the UK and the US in particular, we focus far too much on the difference as opposed to the commonality.
And when you focus on what makes us together, like the devout Muslims here, like they don't drink, they believe in traditional family values, and conservative devout Christians, we believe in that as well. I think that reminds me of when I was a first-time entrepreneur, reaching out to my first angel investor. He was Jewish, but we still prayed together and said grace before eating food, because it's important to find commonalities from diverse perspectives. Any last tangible advice that you can share when it comes to seeking unity rather than division in politics or in leadership?
Look, I would say talk to people that are different to you. It can be very easy to talk to your comfort zone, to your own community, to the people that will agree with you. But, really going out there, and this is what you and I are speaking at the Indo-Pak Dosti Forum.
Yeah.
This is about bringing people of Indian and Pakistani heritage. And those two countries are, have been at the brink of war very recently.
Religiously too, right?
And religiously differences.
Yeah.
But actually, there's nobody more common and more similar to Pakistanis than Indians. And nobody more similar to Indians than Pakistanis, because we share culture, cuisine,
used to be the same
faith.
country, right?
Yeah, at one point the same country.
Bangladesh too, right?
And Bangladesh too. Exactly. So,
Sri Lanka too, right?
Yeah, so we share such commonality. Yeah. And I think if I had some tangible advice, as you ask, is, whether you're starting out in leadership or whether you're already in leadership, find people that really challenge your perspective. And you're never too old or too experienced to learn from other people's challenge.
And just push yourself out of your comfort zone to talk to people who disagree and maybe agree to disagree.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, again, in the issue of Kashmir, which is a very hot topic between India and Pakistan and has been for decades. Really interesting. We were listening to a former diplomat who was in the room, and Mani Shankar was making the point that actually when it came to this issue of Kashmir, they even had to agree on what they had to agree on what they disagree on. So even that was part of the peace negotiations. It fell apart for lots of different reasons. So I think, look, don't try to find false consensus, and at the same time, prepare to be challenged and prepare to do the challenging.
And for future aspiring prime ministers or presidents, what is your advice there? Lead by example, lead by your ethics, by your values, by your principles. And for you, it's been mostly your Muslim faith, or also just family values as well? Yeah,
look, for me, actually, my values are not just rooted in faith, although that's important for me. When you're a leader, you've got to represent everybody, whether you're atheist, agnostic, gay, straight,
immigrants,
whatever your background is, you've got to lead for the entire population that you're with. And I think the most important tangible advice is, look, be guided by some values. Because otherwise, if you're not guided by some value, then all you do is you blow with the wind, whatever might feel like it's popular. And that can be quite dangerous. We're living in a time of, I'm afraid, rising populism, which is dividing communities apart. So I think, look, real tangible advice is be rooted in some purpose, be rooted in some values, be authentic to who you are, and don't be afraid of who you are, and project that out, because people will really value your authenticity.
Never compromise your values. Humza, for me, I never drank. My grandpa died in a car accident and he was drinking and driving. So it's a very personal decision, nothing to do with the Christian faith. I just don't want to dance with something that's going to affect me, because I know my family had addictions to alcoholism. So I got invited to speak at Anheuser-Busch, Budweiser and everything. And then the Q&A, 100 people in front, they were like, what's your favorite drink? And I was like, orange juice, right? But I wasn't afraid of speaking my true self, right? That's the authentic advice that you're giving to leaders.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think people would really respect that, because they would hear the story about your grandfather, about your family history, and they would say, well, we can really connect with that. And by the way, the alcohol industry is now pouring out non-alcoholic versions of their drinks left, right, and centre, because you're seeing more and more people moving in that direction. So look, be authentic, tell your story. Storytelling is an ancient art form, and it's a way to connect with people. Don't ever lose your empathy either, and be driven by values. Because if you're not driven by your values, you're just going to, I'm afraid, fall into that trap of populism we see that's causing so much rancor in the world.
And we've seen in 2022 in Qatar at the World Cup how they didn't really promote, right?
Yeah. Look, and people have said that it would be a terrible World Cup, and actually,
it was amazing,
most of the people that went there, including you, will say it was one of the best World Cups they've ever been to. It was safe.
Super safe.
They felt like there was no issues with hooliganism, thuggery, which I'm afraid sometimes in football we can see. So look, I think being authentic to who you are and your values is so important as a leader.
Well, thank you, Humza, so much for joining the Good Return podcast. I'm really grateful for your time today.
Pleasure. And I'll see you at the World Cup.
Yes, see you at the World Cup in a few months.
Where Scotland will be crowned champions.
You guys will
for the
win.
first time in history.
I'm going to Levi Stadium. God bless you.
Yeah,
thank you
thank you
so
so
much.
much.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.